concluded had exactly that. And we lived it because in St. Vincent, I lived it because within a week of arriving in St. Vincent to respond to a volcano, they had heavy winds, flooding, rainfall, like heavy strong rainfall and winds. So they had some flooding, etc. And we were doing all of that at the same time that COVID was going on. And then St. Vincent also had a dengue outbreak. So it's always a multi-hazard environment we have to plan to go into to work. And then when you think about Haiti, an island, a country such as Haiti, they have the multiplicity of hazards, plus a concern that SEDIMA has no control over, or none of us, the stability of your governance. If the governance within a country is unstable, who then manages the response to these disasters? And we saw it in Haiti. They had flooding taking place, and then boom, an earthquake took place amidst some diseases, and then the governance structure within the country. So we have to try and become more and more flexible and diverse in how we manage these responses, and then how we go in and what we can do in certain countries. So yes, we are trying to expand, and as our mandate is not to deal with only hurricanes, our mandate is to deal with all disasters that would affect across the region of the Caribbean. Thank you. Sure.
Good day to everybody. Denver Duplessis representing WASCO from St. Lucia. I know we briefly touched on, you said there's pre, there's during, and there's after.
Yes.
The pre, the preparation for example, a water audit. When a water audit is carried out and the vulnerable areas of the systems are identified, is there a mechanism in place? And if there is, can you just go through it for me, please? That we could tap into these resources for major upgrades that we foresee could be challenging should a disaster arise. Thank you.
It's interesting that you will say if there's a resource, because I think you want to talk about who could help finance the upgrade to these systems. Who owns the systems? Who? The countries. So therefore, SEDIMA does not have a bank account, because SEDIMA is funded by whom? The governments of the SEDIMA participating states. So SEDIMA, though, I'm not putting it out, can sometimes lobby for some projects to finance such type infrastructural upgrades, and so it's something we can look into. It's not something that, and if it's something we look into, it might not be, it depends on the case made by the individual participating state through us to lobby to one of our international donors, but it's not something that is out of the way to say. But if we see that there's a need to say, hey, we need to strengthen the water resources in this country, so and then to source everything, you have to go through your National Disaster Office. So your water agency must have that agreement or that engagement with the National Disaster Office, and then they can tap into the SEDIMA resource if we can see we can source that kind of funding internationally, or some partners or donor agencies. But the first port of call really should be to your government agency to fund that kind of thing. I know we are a little bit for time. And are there any further questions from anyone? Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your attention, and I hope that you enjoy the remainder of your conference. And SEDIMA was happy to be a part of CWOC as a partner as we continue to work together to ensure resilience, build resilience across the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Hills and SEDIMA. We really appreciate the support that SEDIMA has given us, and we continue as partners to support the work in the region as part of the WASH system. Of course, as the representative of SEDIMA has informed us, that we need to be prepared, and he gave us an outline of how this is done. And I think in every utility, I know that every utility ought to have an emergency response plan. But emergency response plans are not static. It's a dynamic process, and we have to keep revising and upgrading our response mechanisms and our disaster and emergency plans. Now, we have been working with another very important international grouping or agency of the United Nations, that is the UNICEF, and they have established in our hemisphere the WASHLAC, really that is to do with the water sanitation and hygiene group for the Latin America and the Caribbean. And they have really given excellent leadership in that regard and given tremendous support to CDEMA and the work of the WASHLAC group within CDEMA, that is with the CWWA and CWOC. And we saw that manifested, albeit remotely, during the volcanic eruption in St. Vincent. We managed to get a couple technical people on the ground, but largely a lot of the work among the utilities giving support to St. Vincent and the Grenadines on the ground was really great support from UNICEF, and we want to thank them for that. But I also would like to applaud and I think we did so in one of our, another space, where the tremendous work done by the operators in St. Vincent and the Grenadines after that eruption to be able to get water back to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in short order, I think within about a 2-week period. And that was amazing work, because they had to empty out all their water catchments, the reservoirs in the mountains, which were filled with ash. And then we had to take samples. And it's amazing when we work together as one Caribbean space. And we were able to get samples taken down by the RSS military vessels down to Trinidad to get tested at labs in Trinidad, labs in Martinique, labs in St. Lucia, and to get the all clear that the water was safe for use. Meanwhile, these teams had to go in the mountains. And some of these places, many of the catchments in a lot of our CARICOM region do not have motorable access to get to some of these places. And these men and women get into those mountains, did the clearance, and got water back to the people of St. Vincent. So we want to applaud the guys who are here for that tremendous work. So now I'm going to invite a good friend of ours from UNICEF, who has been delegated by the UNICEF office, and many of the other officials are out on travel duty, dealing with, as we know, we are at the start of the hurricane season. And so Mr. Alban Nouvelon, who has traveled all the way from IT to be here with us to make this presentation. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Nouvelon.
Thank you very much, Jean, and thanks to CWOC for the invitation. So great. Let's. I'm going to rush a little bit because the best is at the end. So yes. So basically, Ignatius asked me to talk about WASH preparedness for operators, but I think the overall scope of the presentation is really to connect operators with what is the UN system and how do we work, so that and at global level, at regional level, the WASHLAC group he just mentioned, and also how do we connect with the countries, no? So this is the purpose of the presentation. Shall I try to use this? Yeah. Not sure. Yep. Okay. So basically, yeah, the objectives, are twofold. So one is really to make sure that you as operators are more aware about the international cooperation and regarding coordination mechanism, but also tools and approaches that we use for emergency preparedness and response. and also to reflect also in general on the need for a national coordination mechanism at country level, which should not just be for emergency responses times, but also like a long-run regular coordination. No? So here is the coordination landscape. So basically, back in 2005, the clusters have been created within the UN system. And so we're gonna see right now this part at the global level. Then we'll go down to the regional and then the country level. But just maybe to what triggers the fact that UN agencies come and support is really member states, your countries, basically asking for support the same way they do for CDMA. No? So there is an appeal from the countries when they are overwhelmed with a crisis, and then the global mechanism and regional mechanisms and country mechanism as well, because UNICEF is also at country level, trickles down. No? So basically, global WASH cluster, the clusters were created back in 2005. In 2006, between 2006 and 2008, the regional WASH-like group was created because it's good to have guidances from the global level, but it never really applies to the context of our region. So we had, even just on the basics of translation to so many Spanish-speaking countries, for example. So then this group was created by IFRC, by UNICEF and others, and still remains since that. Okay, so this don't be overwhelmed with this one. It's we don't need to go into the details, but basically affected people are at the center, and you see just above and below coordination and information management. These are just the core things that we're going to discuss today. And then you've got like different circles. So the red one is how the UN system works in a sudden onset crisis, and you've got the days. So basically within the first month, then within the next 3 months, and then years. Within the year, all the different situations about situation analysis, initial planning, implementation, monitoring, and then follow up. Then the blue circle is regarding the let's say the protracted crisis. So basically the scale here is different, and you see the months of the year, because we've got cycles as a UN agencies where we produce these humanitarian needs overviews, where we launch our appeals for funding, and so on and so forth. So yes, it's basically our humanitarian program cycle. And this works also with very critical documents, which are this HNO here, Humanitarian Needs Overview, the HRP, Humanitarian Response Plan, as a UN system supporting the governments, and also we've got all the different CITREPs and appeals that are here to leverage funds. So yeah, don't really be. It's just an overall presentation of this. No. So what is very interesting, back in 2005, what they created is they came out with these 6+1 functions of the clusters. Basically clusters, coordination mechanisms. No? And when you read these, basically you can probably project yourself very easily as an operator. These are very like the common functions that need to apply. And they come from this book on the right-hand side, the HIASC. Basically, HIASC is the Interagency Steering Committee. So all the implementing agencies of the UN system, let's say WFP, FAO, UNDP, UNICEF, WHO, IOM, and so on and so forth, are the heads, the executive directors of these agencies are part of the steering committee. No? So, not to go into details, but support basically, in our WASH sector, obviously the WASH service delivery, this is our primary role as cluster. Inform strategic decision making, plan and implement the strategies, monitor, evaluate the response and the performance, build national capacity, support robust advocacy. And this additional function, it's not really a function, it's more like a function responsibility is to really be accountable to the affected populations. No? So, I mean, yeah, obviously coordination is just, you know, is a fundamental part of it. No? Without coordination, nothing happens. And we know that if coordination doesn't happen, all of these will happen. You know, we're going to duplicate efforts, we're going to miss some people in need, we're going to be late, we're going to have like overhead costs, etc., etc. So I mean, coordination is really the key piece, and we cannot just be well coordinated if we only coordinate during the emergency response. I think we need to really see it as a all year long mechanism. So an ideal coordination, obviously, I mean, goes around these partnership principles, really to make sure that we really optimize the human resources, the financial, the logistic capacities, and that really everyone around the table feels that they are part of it. You know, there is no one actor being, you know, bigger, stronger than the other. We really need to partner with everyone. And most of the time, I think when the humanitarian entities, NGOs, UN system come in emergency response, we often tend to forget about the private sector, about the utilities. You know, we tend to think that we are the ones, you know, with our buckets and kits and messaging, saving the world. But I think, I mean, there is definitely a much more coordination and connection that we need to do with the private sector, with the national and public service delivery. I think this is something that comes more and more into practice. But we need to really remind it, as well as, for example, the academic sector. I think most of the time we don't tend to think about the academic sector, but they are very useful partners to document, even to do surveys, sometimes to do analysis. You know, they've got labs, they can really bring a lot. So yeah, an ideal connection really goes around these principles, you know, and every coordinator should respect and make sure that these principles are implemented. So this global WASH cluster on internet and go and visit it. Right, I mean, this is a picture from 2021, but basically around 20 to 30 countries have activated officially by the UN activated clusters. And so what the Global WASH Cluster does, they've got dashboards, and they make sure that they follow up how the activated cluster report on this HRP, this Human Response Plan. I mean, are we doing good? Well, shall we get more resources to support coordination, information management, and so on and so forth? So now let's move to the regional level. So as I was telling you, I mean, yeah, created back in 2005, 2006, 2008, to really land all these guidance and approaches to the countries of Latin America and the LAC region. And I have to admit that this group back in 2008 really focused, basically they were like Spanish-speaking people. So the Caribbean, English-speaking countries were like kind of not really in the focus. And we really took, with my colleague Sonny and with others that you will see right now, really took the opportunity of COVID really to grow and to really interact and jump into these English-speaking Caribbean countries that we were always tending not to attend because of really little human resources as well, no? So, I mean, we are connected, obviously, with the Global WASH Cluster based in Geneva. The Red LAC is just the UN under the OCHA, you know, which is a coordination mechanism for the UN agencies. We are connected with them at the regional level for Latin America and the Caribbean. We've got our WASH LAC group with a secretariat and two institutions that are also part of an advisory group. And then we've got, basically we interact with 47 countries and territories out of the 51 who are in the region. And this came really from COVID, 2020, back in 2020. If you ask me the same thing back in 2019, we were all around 12 countries and territories. And it's not just the actors of the platforms, the coordination platforms within these countries and territories. It's also all the other actors in the WASH, universities, donors, NGOs, private sector, utilities, and so on and so forth. So we are this group of a few people that really represent all these different entities. So in terms of team, what the team is about. So we've got Eduardo from WHO, PAHO, my colleague Sonny. We've got colleagues from IFRC and Save the Children, and a few others. So for example, the information manager that we have is right now in between contracts. Benedicto is a consultant, a multi-country consultant that we have for Spanish-speaking countries. And Jenil, that you probably, some of you have probably interacted with over the last year and a half, is no longer working with us, but his post is under, again, multi-country support for WASH in emergency in the Caribbean, English-speaking countries. So he's under recruitment. So again, please have a look at our web page, washlac.com. And you can really see all this, repository of information that were already mentioned by others, and guidance, tools that we can afford, and trainings. So yeah, our role is very similar to what CWOC and CWWA already do, and regarding operational support for effective coordination at country level, but also evidence generation. Information management, analysis, capacity development as well, and partnerships. But the overall region, including Latin America. So where did we support? Ignatius mentioned a few of them. I'm not going to repeat, but maybe just to highlight the. Okay, so maybe yeah. So highlight the Hurricane Maria. I was deployed in Dominica for Hurricane Maria response, and what was very interesting is that I was really being the connection between DOWASCO and the international humanitarian community. Basically, Eva James was the lead in terms of really getting the water systems back to work. Obviously, she had absolutely no time to go to our coordination meetings of the humanitarian community. And we needed some, and the humanitarian community needed information as well from DOWASCO to understand where we could help, support, and so on and so forth. So the first month I was there, I was really basically on a daily basis going early morning to DOWASCO, really chatting with Eva at the back of a truck that she was dispatching and everything to grab the information from DOWASCO. And going in the afternoon at the meeting with the international community to give them the feedback from what DOWASCO was asking for, and feeding her back the next Monday morning on what we had decided and discussed also at the coordination meeting in the afternoon. And this took, this lasted for a month until, and we all know, during a Maria hurricane, every single person and every single employee in DOWASCO has been affected, as losing probably even relatives and families and homes and so it basically took a month until of back and forth every morning and afternoon until DOWASCO was able to really come and sit at the table and coordinate with all of us. And so this kind of agreements, it was the right fit for purpose, at that time to make sure that the international community doesn't act in parallel to what DOWASCO, in that case, needed. And all this, obviously, we do it in strong coordination with CDMA and CWWA and CWOC, as Ignatius mentioned. So in our regional page, we host also, basically the coordination platform and information of other countries, as you can see in the image below. For example, countries who don't have yet the information management capacity, our information manager gives this support and provide all this expertise to them, so that they've got their repositories, they've got their libraries, they've got all their tools hosted in this regional page. The very interesting thing about the regional WASHLAC group is that if the Global WASH cluster created minimum requirements for coordination, so what makes a coordination being a good coordination, we basically have a checklist with many points in it. What we took as a LAC region, we adapted it, adjusted it to the context of the region, no? And as you can see, I mean, there are so many different things, no? To make sure that you've got a good coordination, you need, obviously, terms of references, governance structure of your coordination group at country level. You also need like tools, and we're going to deep dive into these. You need a web page. You need a WASH assessment repository and tools. You need work plans. And all these different preparedness and capacity tools that are listed here. So we've got this list, and really, we've got a dashboard where we can really see where are the countries, are they fulfilling most of these requirements or not, and this allows us to support you in the best way possible. And now let's go down to the country level. So, I mean, the key recommendation, I mean, we talked about partnership. Partnership is really of the essence. And what is very clear here is that if you really want to have a good coordination mechanism, you just first really need to think, who needs to be at the table. And don't miss big players, because whatever you do, if you miss the big players, you will never have this good coordination that you hope for, no? So, and big players can be so many, no? Obviously, the WASH sector never acts on its own. We are very well connected with the health, with nutrition, with education. We need to work with the utilities, the private sector, and also the civil society. So yeah, we just really need to think, like, are the people around the table representative of all the groups of interest of the sector? And if not, we need to reach out to them and have them on board in this coordination mechanism. And because, I mean, yeah, coordination, I mean, WASH is so broad, and we can do resilience and so on and so forth. I think let's not get overwhelmed at the start. Let's start with at least preparedness and response. And when we get this almost like good enough, then we can bring some more complexity into water resource management and so on and so forth. But I think, I mean, within a year, it's quite easy to go through the basic of really settling down the basic of preparedness and response. So, yeah, I mean, just I mean, we're not going to go into details, but these are, like terms of reference of a WASH coordination committee. You want to be inclusive. You want to have both, like the national level, the subnational level, and local level being represented. You need to also make sure that all the good practices are put in place by the different members. No, there are like roles and responsibilities, like in any grouping. No, you need to monitor and report on what you've been doing as an actor to the group, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go into much details here. And maybe if you don't have this coordination mechanism yet in place in your country, I mean, basically this would be the kind of very roadmap from the architecture, governance to the TORs, having a work plan, make sure that this work plan. I mean, most of the time in the small countries, the WASH coordination group would probably deal with both emergency and non-emergency topics. But yeah, let's start with the emergency one at least. And then, yeah, strategic advisory group. Most of the time, you don't want to put all the burden of the coordination on one person. So you say, okay, you've been nominated coordinator. Now you just deal with everything. That's not fair. So you can have coordinator and co-lead, but these two people are not necessarily the one who should be taking the decisions on everything. So that's why you create this strategic advisory group. So then basically the coordinator is just a facilitator of processes, and the final decisions are taken by this strategic advisory group. And if you want to address a specific topic, technical issue, instead of overloading your coordination meetings with too much technical details, then you create a group of people that will have a specific technical task to solve, and then to come back to the group and present it as a solution or a validation of their inputs, no? And yeah, so I mean, yeah, this is Bahamas, Dorian, and so yeah, existing tools. I mean, I'm not going to go into detail with all these tools because I mean, several of them belongs to you already, and we host many of them in our regional page. And we've got also developed like a standardized national wash preparedness and response plan. In case you don't have one, you can always use this one as a basic, and then just I mean, reshape it as per your needs. The good thing with this one is that it's written in such a way that you can use the same activities and the same indicators if you are at a community level, a parish level, or at a national level. So that you really have all the administrative level talk to each other, and we all talk about the same things, no? Same activities and same and same indicators. And we also have, obviously, with Operators Without Border, like a lot of technical SOPs for disaster. But here is a nice part of it. I mean, what is I'm probably like a geek in terms of data management, but not so expert. But we talk a lot about, you know, emergency and assessments. Okay, there is an incident. Okay, we go and do assessments. The problem going to the field just doing assessments is that you always miss the main, I mean, the biggest part, which is what was the vulnerability of the group of people or of the institution prior to the crisis. Because, you know, if a multimillionaire lost his secondary home, I mean, yeah, too bad. But I mean, I'm not going to spend a second thinking about what are your needs. You probably fly, you know, on your helicopter or private jet and go to your main home, no? So, but if you are like a very vulnerable family and you've been slightly affected, I mean, not so badly, but like somehow affected, this will put you on a burden, and you may even fall into I mean, somehow, sometimes even back to in poverty, no? So I mean, my big problem with assessments is that the assessments are very like blind of what was the situation before, and we tend to see, you know, where there's big damage, then we go because it looks very bad. It looks very bad, but if they can afford to fix it, that's it. So that's why I really want to really I mean, strengthen this point on a vulnerability-centered, data-driven management system. I mean, if we are not able, as an operator, to understand exactly in our networks where are the vulnerable communities, we will probably always miss our targeting in terms of the most needed in an emergency response. And so, yeah, so it's within your service area, but also outside of the service area for including other actors, no? So I just want to, I mean, yeah, to show you a few examples of this Excel-based matrix that I've developed in ETA and IOTA response back in 2020-21. But there are like very promising tools like mWater and Solstice. So basically, I mean, just to show you how can you go wrong in an emergency? How can you really miss the point of targeting the most vulnerable? This was in Guatemala, in one department. For the ETA and IOTA response, I've plotted different criteria of, you know, indigenous groups, isolation from any road, level of wash services, level of education services, and like a few criteria to understand the vulnerability. And this is basically the list I came up with in this province with the 50 most vulnerable communities prior to the ETA and IOTA hurricanes and storms, no? And when I plotted this, then I came and I plotted the partners who were supporting these communities. And you only see this like 3 blue dots. This is how wrong you can go if you don't have an information system like robust prior to an emergency. You just go run like chicken without heads, And everything that you see, obviously, is a need. So then you just step there, when just behind the hill, there is probably major needs, no? So we came with this one. And obviously, I came with this Excel to the meetings. Every week, we had meetings with everyone. And after 6 weeks, the same communities with actors and plotted by kind of activities. You know, like one column, if it's wash in school, one column is wash in healthcare facilities, one column is, you know, fixing the water system, shelters, and so on and so forth. So just because I had information, if I had not built this information system before that, I mean, who would have trusted me saying you need to go there because they are most vulnerable? So this is I think the main point of the conversation. And the next month I was deployed in Honduras, and we developed this information system for the almost 20,000 schools, like almost 2,000 healthcare facilities, and community. Basically, we've plotted all the 35,000 communities and neighborhoods of the country. And the craziness of this is that basically we came up with almost 3,000, sorry, it's in Spanish, but with almost 3,000 affected communities with ETA and IOTA. Nobody would have come up with this. And to tell you how crazy it is, I mean, on the red graph, you see the provinces of the provinces of the country. So just imagine that the second most affected, which is the one below, I mean the almost bottom, I mean pre to the bottom one, Copan was not even mentioned by the international community, by the government, by the provinces. So you can even miss the second most affected province of a country when you don't have information system. This is how bad it can get, no? And the also very funny thing, within a month, just reaching out to almost all the municipalities, their rural wash information system had like 3,200 water systems. Within 2 weeks, just reaching out to all the mayors, we came out with almost 4,000 more rural water systems that were not even in the radar of the national government. How do you possibly want to support an operator if you don't even know it exists? You know, that's, I mean, obviously, I mean, I know you're quite visible in the Caribbean because you're national operators, but yeah, think just about the small water system, you know, like in the hill, behind the hill, and so on and so forth. And to conclude with this one, I mean, it's the same exercise that we did in Nicaragua, again in a month. We've plotted all the little dots that you see are the points of with communities. You see the trajectory of ETA and IOTA that came into in Nicaragua as hurricanes. And you see different colors, basically, of where are the squares and so on and so forth, where are basically UNICEF did its intervention. And it's quite funny that when you do it afterwards, I mean, I came, it was already ongoing, no? But when you see afterwards, I mean, sometimes they reached out to very small red dots, but sometimes not always. Sometimes they were just yellow dots. So then, because they had not the information in the prior place, no? And the good thing of crossing this information system with health issues is that all you see the big red circles with a dark point in the middle we've crossed the water, I mean wash-related diseases incidents from the year before compared to the months after the hurricane. And when there was an increase in diarrheas, you've got these communities are plotted in red. So you can really go deep into the details because health comes up with an epidemiologic report every month. So that's very easy to plot in. So if you have your vulnerability criteria or index distribution plotted for all your country, you just come up basically in 1 hour, an information manager comes and just puts the layer of the impact from the eye of the hurricane or the earthquake, you recalculate your vulnerability plus impact, and then you have your priority index of where to go and do my assessments. And then you really go for the communities that need it the most. And just, I mean, I think for me the state of the art in terms of, this was just Excel because I'm not a program manager, like an informatic programming person, but basically you've got a system right now that's called Solstice, solstice.world, that they do it at a country level, and they do it, it's multi-sectorial. So it's not just a wash, let's say, a platform, but it's a tool where you can really bring your, like who is doing what, where. You can monitor every single actor coming in and intervening, and you can really plot at country level and multi-country level, basically, what, at the end of the day, what we want to know is, here was a vulnerability pre-crisis, here is a new vulnerability after the impact, here is someone intervening, an NGO, the operator, whoever. At the end of the intervention, we should see the vulnerability reducing down. And if you are able to monitor it on every single community, every single school, healthcare facilities, and so on and so forth, and every single actor, then you've got accountability. Then you've got accountability, because if you supported a school and fixed it, and the next event, she's as vulnerable as the neighbors that were not affected, that were in the area, then you probably didn't do the right job to really strengthen them. So with that, so all of this comes down to coordination. If we don't have a coordination mechanism, we will not address the information management challenges, and will not come with these tools and systems. So the question to you is, what are your next steps? I know that as operators, you coordinate, but I think what we really miss is the connection between the utilities, the Ministry of Health, probably the national emergency mechanisms on a regular basis, and not just when emergencies strike. Because then we keep on just running after the problems, instead of really settling down and really strengthening the whole system. And if we talk about resilience of the wash sector, we really want to settle like systems, put in place systems. I think I've probably went over, but that's it. Oh yeah, and this one last, if you want to scan this one, we are doing a survey to understand the possibility of probably having a barge system that would be able to potabilize seawater and come and provide treated water in the Caribbean to affected areas, and in between crises to produce water for agriculture or resilient projects. So if you want to scan this and spend a few time, we need to collect data just to really build the case of the need or not of such an initiative, and really support it. So yeah, thank you, Jean. So maybe just one or two questions maximum, I guess, if any. And if not, I'm here for the 3 days, so I want to speak with several of you, by the way. So yes, more than happy to discuss during the event. So I think we're good, yeah? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alban, for this very comprehensive presentation. I know that you're watching the clock, but I know that you're not just yet hungry, because we just had a big break. So we're going to press on, and we're now going to have the panel discussion, so that our water operators from 4 utilities will now come to the dais here to tell us some of the work that they have been doing as far as preparedness and the challenges they have faced. And you could share your experiences with colleagues, and fear not in here, because you're sitting among colleagues and partners to share those experiences. So I'm now going to invite the representative of the Barbados Water Authority, Mr. Jamal Mascall. I have Mr. Kendall Durand of DOWASCO. Now, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I think it's going to CWSA, Mr. Bradley Jackson. And the Cayman Islands, is it Mr. Powery or is it Mr. Johnson? Yeah, Johnson, yes, please. So what we will begin doing is to get a quick introduction from our 4 panelists. So I'm not going to read out your bios, so you will just tell us briefly your role in your utilities, and then we're going to get into the discussion. So I'll start with you, Mr. Mascall. When you get a green light, you're good to go.
Hi, good morning. My name...
You can sit.
Oh, I can sit. Thank you. Hi, good morning. My name is Jamal Masco. I am the Senior HR Officer for Safety and Health at the Barbados Water Authority. As a part of this discussion, I will be looking at the pandemic and the impact of COVID and preparedness going forward. I'm quite pleased to be among you, and I'm quite grateful for the invitation, and I hope we can have a delightful session.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Bradley Jackson, representing CWSA from St. Vincent. I am project manager supervisor, responsible for implementation of and coordinating of projects and new water sources. I am here talking about the key preparedness and the effects of the volcano and how we were able to mitigate and manage during that time and disaster. I'm happy to be here and able to share. Hope that we can learn from this exercise. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Johnson. I'm representing the Cayman Islands Water Authority. My role there is the superintendent of water supply, so primarily in the distribution of the potable water system. My role in terms of this panel will be discussing the impacts or mitigating the impacts of earthquakes and hurricanes for operators. And I hope that we can have a productive discussion. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Kendall Durand from Dominica. I'm representing the Dominica Water and Sewage Company Limited, the WASCO, and I'm here to speak on the effects of Hurricane Maria, Tropical Storm Erika on us in Dominica. I'm with the WASCO now for the past 25 years as a supervisor of the North District presently, and I'm very happy and grateful to be here to speak on what. Thank you.
Right. I don't know if you have slide presentations. Okay, so we will start with Mr. Mascall, and if you can use the podium because you have a presentation, so please.
Good morning. Sorry, good afternoon. I'm quite behind time. So we're looking at the preparedness actions for pandemic based upon lessons from the past. The morning session is on crisis recovery and resilience. So I thought that I would structure my few minutes up here based upon those things: crisis, recovery, and resilience. So the crisis that I'm speaking about this afternoon, will be COVID-19. So what was it, or what is it? So the coronavirus disease, COVID-19, is an infectious disease caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. It was first reported in Wuhan, China in December of 2019, and the first case in the Caribbean would have been March 10th, 2020 in Jamaica. And it took 3 months for COVID to travel 9,000 miles. Now, we would have all heard about like Ebola, MERS, other infectious diseases. And when I personally first heard about COVID, it was like, that's not going to get here. It's simply too far away from us. And, before we knew it, it was here and it was upon us. It came to Barbados. The first reported case in Barbados was on the 17th of March, 2020. But no matter what the crisis is, be it a pandemic, be it earthquakes, volcanoes erupting, hurricanes, whatever, we still have a mandate. And what is that mandate? To provide potable water and to provide the treatment and disposal of wastewater. And this is because these things, these activities must go on. And the mandate also extends to providing a safe and a healthy environment for staff as they go about their duties, for customers as they interact with us. Again, we have our mandate to maintain. So we still have to respond to emergencies. We still have to, sewage and water services. We still have to take payments, vendors. At the end of the day, our utilities are still companies. We still have to interact with our vendors, contractors that would be doing work on our behalf, and other third parties. Recovery. Throughout this exercise, we learned how to really wash our hands. Not just, you're done. But then we had the whole thing, you sing the happy birthday song twice, and there's a whole bunch of this and a whole bunch of that, and getting the back and all that. And then we learned how to social distance. As Caribbean people, we bunch up together all the time. You have crop over, you have carnival, you have all those things that you get together and lame, etc. COVID taught us what 6 feet was. So now it's, you're too close. We got accustomed to masks and sanitizer being essential for leaving home as much as keys in your wallet. So many of us would have had instances where you hop out the car and like, oh shoot, my mask. I had to go back and get my mask. All right. And why? Because we're the essential workers. Operators, utilities are essential workers. And because what we do can't be done via Zoom. So in some instances, business went completely digital. Everything was done digitally. But you cannot operate a sewage plant from home. You can't fix a fault from home. And throughout the pandemic, workers would have worked dutifully and diligently to ensure that their countries recovered by fulfilling the mandate of providing potable water and the treatment and disposal of wastewater. So recovery of countries was done based upon the diligence and the hard work of essential workers at utilities. Resilience. So resilience is defined as the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties. And there's this song, I think it might be a little bit well known, from Bob Marley. It says, good friends we've had and good friends we've lost along the way. In this great future, you can't forget your past. You can't build upon the future without acknowledging the past. And with this pandemic, some of us in here probably would have lost loved ones. But experience develops resilience. This is no longer in the realm of the unknown. So when COVID first came around, you would have had the realm of the unknown. People weren't sure exactly what it is, what it did, how you got sick. People were dying. It was well in the unknown. So how do we react? How do we work? How do we remain true to our mandate? By going through that experience and learning from it, we now are better prepared to handle an oncoming crisis. And indeed, lessons learned from the pandemic are now permeating into the resilience to natural disasters, making us more resilient as water utilities. So for example, when we had our planning sessions for Brett a couple of weeks ago, some of the things that are the lessons that we would have learned from working remotely for the pandemic came into the planning and were available for us to respond because we were there and because we learned from that experience. So thank you very much. I was told to do 4 slides and keep it quick. I hope I have done that, and I hope you've enjoyed this little presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maskell. We Yes, we did have some timelines for a panel that they would just have about 4 slides maximum to keep us going on time. But we will have time for questions and answers shortly. So our next presenter will be from the CWSA, Mr. Bradley Jackson.
All right, good afternoon. Protocol already established. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this part of the presentation this afternoon. If I were to ask persons to show hands of how many persons, well, persons here would have experienced pandemic, such as the COVID-19, as was spoken to earlier on, other issues, floods, and so forth. How many persons have experienced a volcanic eruption here? Okay, I thought so. Yes, so it's quite unique to St. Vincent. And next time you come, you can you can contact me. We can then take a hike up to La Soufrière. So here we go. Key preparedness, key disaster preparedness action, CWSA, emergency management, La Soufrière. As we know, the characteristics of La Soufrière here, as I want to let you know, is a volcano or a composite volcano, steep conical shape built up by various eruptions, lava flow, tephra, and pyroclastic flows. It has a history of effusive eruptions, and the most catastrophic eruption, as you see it, is between 1812 and 1902, where we had around 1,600 persons would have lost their lives during those both eruptions. And the most deadly threat to a volcanic explosion, as you can see from, is the pyroclastic flows and the lahars. Now, we have looked at the volcanic hazard map, which gives us a guidance as to which areas are more vulnerable and what are the challenges that we'll face going forward and how we can mitigate it. We have what you call the red zone, the orange zone, the yellow zone, and the green zone. Now, understanding where persons live and how we have to evacuate and deal in mitigating water challenges is quite critical in this case. Now, as we said, the hazard map gives us a definition as to what the high-risk areas and how we will be able to then deal with these issues. The hazard zone was established based on known behavior of La Soufrière from previous eruptions as material and information garnered from UWI Seismic Resource Center since 1952. The areas in the red zone can be, as we know, impacted by pyroclastic flows and also lahars. And areas in the orange zone, red and orange zone, are typically impacted by dens. So the red zone we have, which are persons who live in that area. We have fans in it. I will let you know a while. These are some of the villages that we have in that area, are impacted heavily by the heavy ashfall. And then those in the orange zone also will have similar, although albeit in a lesser capacity. As we go forward, you see, since from January to December 2021, the volcano La Soufrière began effusive eruption. And we can see here the andesites being effusing from the La Soufrière. And you can see the dome well-shaped as we move along. So because of that information, we start to mitigate, and we'll show in the slides a while from now as to we start mitigating and planning to be able to then deal with this situation based on information given by the experts. So from January 2021 and to April 8, we saw the explosive eruption of La Soufrière. The dome was no longer there. Picture taken from the NEMO, National Emergency Management Office in St. Vincent. So, what was the challenge that we have for water distribution in St. Vincent? The CWSA distribute potable water from surface water and springs. And water being under the surface and springs, you know what the challenges of ash and the deposits of these materials can have with our system. And we have surface water and spring sources for 12 systems, which take care of 98% of our population. And this system is divided into 7 districts that are monitored by our water operators. We have in St. Vincent 5 treatment plants, one in Dalloway, which is in the South Leeward area, Jennings, North Central Windward, Perseverance, North Windward, Hermitage, and this one is Mamoon. This one more is in the Kingstown. This is more southern part of the early development in Mamoon. So this wasn't really affected much, but we had Jennings, Perseverance, and Hermitage that were affected severely by the ashfall. So the systems, we have other systems, because as I mentioned, we have 12, 5 being with treatments such as slow sand filtrations and also chlorination. We have other systems that have secondary treatments, but which also include chlorination as well. Now, as you'll see the map there, the very high-risk area in the red zone, Fancy, Oya, Sandy Bay. And these systems feed about 4% of the population in that area. And in the orange zone area, we have the Perseverance, which take care of 5% of the population. Jennings, also in the north central Windward area, take care of 14% of the population. And we have Hermitage in the south, in the leeward area of the leeward side of the island. Let's look at our key preparedness actions. We discovered that it's time to establish technical preparedness team when we received news and information that the volcano began effusive eruption. We have developed evacuation procedures. We have to execute to safeguard resources, looking at that as well. We will also look at conduct inventory of stock and emergency procurement, build capacity to detect contaminants, and also produce a clear communication plan. Let me just go through them quickly. So here it is. Established technical prepared team. A task force was composed, which looked at the establishment of plan to mitigate against the risk of potable water supply, to derive an evacuation strategy, and plan for recovery. The task force also looked at gather information about the hazard from the experts. The technical team also was engaged when the effusive eruption, the volcano began effusive eruption December 2021. And also that technical team looked at also all operational activities to safeguard life, source infrastructure before, during, and after explosive eruption was planned. Then we looked at developing evacuation procedure, identify vehicles and equipment to be moved to safe zone and which will be used in the evacuation process. We assign personnel to evacuate, or to execute, that is, shutdown on systems to prevent contamination, and drivers to assist in these operations and evacuation of workers and family. Establish plan for reassignment of evacuated workers, because workers moving from, as I was mentioned, the red zone, coming into the yellow or the green zone, we have to then reassign them in terms of work scope. Set protocols for assessment of affected areas, and the affected areas being the red zone mostly and the orange zone. And in fact, the entire island, but mostly affected was the red zone and the orange zone in that area. We saw over 20,000 persons were evacuated through governmental orders from the 2 zones, which is the red zone, that is the northern part of St. Vincent. Then we developed evacuation procedure, identify vehicles and equipment to be moved to safe zone. I did that already, nice. I dealt with that one already, nice. Execute work of safeguard resource. Critical valves were checked during the effusive phase of the eruption. These are valves which shut water going in and out of treatment plants and tanks. To determine systems which can be kept online and those which would have to be shut down completely. Some springs were earmarked to be kept online, and those that were earmarked to be kept online were covered with tarpaulins and channeled water was channeled using PVC pipes where possible to the holding tanking areas. The system in the red zone were all shut down, as I've said before, on April 8, when the evacuation order was given by the government. All valves to storage tanks were locked on the island, locked island-wide when the first blast occurred. This occurred remotely. Some were recorded remotely by SCADA, using the SCADA system. Others had to be done manually. Then we have conduct inventory of stock and emergency procurement. Determine critical stock needed, such as treatment supplies, which include chlorine, PPEs, and also tarpaulin, different supplies that is needed for response, emergency response. Carry out procurement outside of normal schedule. Seek aid in advance of explosion. And this is where we had most of our partners who came in, such as UNDP, CDMA, UNICEF, CWOC, and the International Atomic Energy Agency. We sought these individuals who were able to then assist in helping St. Vincent mitigate and to go through some of the challenges with the volcanic eruption. This is what you see in a picture here of Sandy Bay. As Mr. Jean was saying, terrain was quite difficult to get to these sources, and it's a real difficult hike. You take about 2 hours to get there, and to move through ash and other fallen trees was quite difficult for our operators. But through hard work and resilience, we were able to then make it happen. I have another picture to show you here, the sedimentation tank at Jennings. As you were told, those tanks had to be emptied. They cleaned, take out the sand that will help aid in the slow sand filtration system, and then resanded. And that would have taken the guys, and there are 4 of these, about a week or so to do. It's quite a lot of work, but it is like the phoenix out of the ash we rise to be able to then have water, potable water, back to our communities. As you saw on the right there is a rain gauge that is filled with ash. And I was telling my partner earlier on I should have brought some ash with me to share with you after the presentation, but I forgot that. Building capacity, I don't know if you would have wanted it, but procure equipment as necessary to detect contaminants, ensure necessary reagents and stock the increase where necessary, increase sampling bottles and stationery, plan for exportation of samples where necessary, and liaison with the testing agency. And we would have certainly sent some samples to Trinidad where they were able to assist us with the testing. And I'm coming to the end. Establish chain of command for communication to public, control, establish the forum for communication with staff, employee, tools, and so forth was all done. We were to procure digital radios so that we'd be able to communicate better through water operators, and bring information to the public as to the risk of the sources and the ability to distribute water when explosive eruption. All this information was shared. Educate public about simple, that is, disinfection methods such as boiling of water and storage, domestic storage. Lesson learned. Outline emergency management plan for explosive eruption. That is quite critical when looking at a volcanic eruption. Reinforce relationship with agencies such as NEMO, SVG, UE, Seismic Research Center, UNDP, and the likes of all these agencies. Preventative maintenance, that is, on all critical valves, intake valves, outlet valves to tanks, important to maintain that, ensure that they are working. Build resilience of systems, especially in the high-risk area, by developing groundwater water treatment and hydraulic system. As I was said before, that all of our water is surface water and springs. And presently we are at the exploration of groundwater system in the area of Orange Hill. So be able to then put that into effect, so we have that as a resilient tool, as it were, to mitigate against volcanic eruption. We have track water storage capacity in shelters, set up teams to handle the inundation of aid. A lot of water came into St. Vincent, and the laboratory techs had to be back and forth, working late up until 12 at night, sometime later, to be testing water, ensuring that water quality is of the highest for persons to consume. So we want to thank all those who have contributed to St. Vincent and the recovery. Some are mentioned there, some are not. As I mentioned, UNICEF, CWOC, CDIMA, and we have so much privilege to be able to partner with these donor agencies to help St. Vincent rise from the ash, like the phoenix, that mystical golden birds associated with the renewal and regeneration. Thank you very much. We are happy for your contribution, and we know that we are better for the knowledge and the experience through difficulties and the challenge that we would have encountered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for, again, this comprehensive review on your experiences with treating with the volcanic eruption. We will move straight ahead as we're trying to catch up on time with Mr. From the Cayman Islands, Water Authority of the Cayman Islands. The floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I was just waiting for
Mr. Johnson.
the PowerPoint to. Okay. Good afternoon again, everyone. I'll be presenting this presentation based on hurricanes and earthquake and mitigating the effects. The importance of preparation lies in the objective of preparation, which is to mitigate, again, the negative effects of earthquakes and hurricanes on the operator's functionality. The functionality of the operator speaks to the quality of the service that the operator provides to the public, and that service would include the production of potable water and the distribution of potable water, and in some instances as well, the collection of sewage, the treatment of sewage, and the disposal of sewage. The key preparedness actions would include formulating a preparedness plan, and that preparedness plan will include identifying critical roles and designating the relevant personnel to fulfill those critical roles. The provision of resources, which would include material and equipment that the personnel would need to achieve the task that was assigned to them, and the preparation of protocols. Some of these protocols would include, for example, the proactive service interruption for storm surges to prevent contamination of the water supply system, as well as the phase reactivation of the water supply system to check for leaks or isolate potential leaks in the event that there's an earthquake, so you would reactivate the system on a phase basis. The organization of the resource is normally managed from a centralized perspective. By doing so, you would prevent duplication of efforts, and you'll be able to more effectively prioritize critical tasks. In terms of communication being a key action, you would need to identify or utilize all possible means of communication. I know in this modern age, we primarily rely on the internet. However, during instances where we have disasters like earthquakes and hurricanes, or most common sources of communication may not necessarily be available, so we should consider utilizing satellite phones, landlines, two-way radios, and of course, if the internet is available, it is still a powerful tool. We can communicate via social media. In terms of infrastructure, for hurricanes, the Cayman Islands, the last major hurricane that hit Grand Cayman was in 2004, which was Ivan. And one of the key things that we learned was that the storm surge caused a lot of damage of critical infrastructure. So you would notice a key feature of buildings that were constructed after 2004, they're elevated compared to the buildings that were built prior. In terms of key preparedness actions as well, public awareness is also critical. You would need to notify the public to store water, and that would, in the event of a pending hurricane, and that will allow the water supply, the operator, to have a buffer in case any repair needs to be done prior to reactivating the system, so the public can play their role in that sense. And then from the sewage side, the public can also be advised to reduce their usage of water if the system is still online during a hurricane, and that will minimize the load on the supply system. So thanks again for your attention, and that's the end of my presentation.
Right, thank you, Mr. Johnson. And now we're going to have Mr. Durant of the WASCO, Dominica.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't have a slide to show, but you will understand very clearly when I speak to you. I'm not going to tell you about a hurricane. I'm going to tell you what we suffered during or after a hurricane. From Dominica, we boast of 365 rivers, but at one point we were almost, with so much water, we were without water because of how severe that hurricane was. So we had a few challenges, not just a few, but we're going to go just through some challenges that we faced during and after Hurricane Maria and even Tropical Storm Erica. We had issues or challenges such as access to our water systems. The roads were completely washed out. Long hours, we could not drive to these intakes. Walking was another story. So access was just hindered in every single way, shape, and form. We also had a problem with communication. When you go in, we had no cell phones. So therefore, we would have a meeting every morning, and that was the communication. And then during that meeting, we would have our expectations, and when we come back next day, so if we decide we're gonna run that amount of pipes for the day, when we come back next day, then that is the only communication that we could bring out to the people. Everybody wanted water, but it was almost an impossible task at the time because no access and everything. We also had the problem of manpower and the expertise. Not everybody could do the water treatment. Not everybody knows how to fix a pipe. So then we fell short. At one point, we were almost looking at taking the prisoners to come and help us because it was that bad. We needed men, and that's what we did not have. So while I'm there, let me say thank you to all the Caribbean utilities who came in and assisted us. Yeah? We had a problem of accommodation. The Caribbean countries wanted to come in, but we could not take you all at the time because we were on the tarpaulins. We had no place to put anyone. So there we had another problem. While we needed help, we could not accept help at the time. So that was another problem or a challenge during this time. We have challenges such as, again, equipment, and then we had contamination. Because of how deep these rivers run, they went to the ground bottom. We were at rock bottom, all the rocks removed. And then what we found that we had sulfur springing up in almost every river or stream, which contaminated the water. So we could not use that water at one point. We could not communicate to the people because we had people were drinking water from almost every drain that ran water. They needed it, but we could not give it to them. But then we needed to advise them that you cannot drink it here or you could not take it there. But we almost could not do it. We had systems which were completely washed out because we depend solely on the rivers. So the entire intake and the pipelines were completely washed out. There were systems where just finishing building, maybe about 2 weeks to inaugurate, 2 weeks to bring it out, to confirm, and I say everything is good. Millions of dollars, and everything was washed to the sea. So we had to go back to start. So the challenges were enormous. We had challenges such as men on the field, but they could not get a meal. 8 hours, 10 hours, 17 hours of work, and we did not have a caterer to even cook for them. So some of them were left out. But they pulled through with just a little crackers and maybe dry some water, and that's all. So we had challenges such as the chemicals. When we got the water flowing again, we had no chemicals. So we had to also wait on when a ship could come in, and we still had challenges with that because they could not come into the ports because of the amount of logs and all that stuff and sand and debris. So we could only do it through helicopter. So the challenges were really enormous. And then, yeah. So for Tropical Storm, we're gonna say thank you again. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, I think we had 4 very good presentations giving us the diversity of all the, as Lieutenant Colonel told us, about planning to treat the multiple hazards and in the multiplicity of countries. And we've seen in some cases, as in St. Vincent, where you had multiple hazards happening all at the same time. You had, during COVID, you had the volcanic eruption, and you had some severe weather systems that brought in rain, and I think there was a tropical storm that approached at that same time. Dengue fever, and they had to deal with all of that. And then in the case of Dominica, where you had the situation with Tropical Storm Erica in 2015, 2017, Maria, and then just last November, and almost every year, there are these events that are not even named, like November 6th, I think we had a similar experience in St. Lucia. And so it continues throughout the Caribbean, and in the Cayman Islands, we had the experience of, I think there was some hurricane threats, as well as an earthquake that just suddenly disrupted some of their installations. I don't want now to pose the questions myself. I would like to leave that for you on the floor. So the floor is open if you should have any questions for our panelists at this stage. Yes, please. And I would like to recognize we have a delegation out of Trinidad and Tobago whom I think we forgot to mention during the opening session. So welcome Trinidad and Tobago, WASA.
Hi, afternoon, Doing Valley again, Trinidad and Tobago, concerning the St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You have the red zones and the orange zones. What is the percentage or the high percentage of the population in the red zone as compared to the other parts of the country? Is there national policies to say, well, you know what, this area you can't inhabit? All right, and if not, would you say that, let us say, for the volcanic eruptions, for the effusive phase, or whatever it starts, if you have volcanic activity, would you say that just in the mindset of it's a black swan event, quote unquote, because it's a black swan event, you could say, well, okay, we'll allow you to build, but you know, it's a certain amount, or we just have mitigation measures or a plan in place to say, well, we could, you know, mitigate against the loss of life and, you know, substance in the, when you have the volcanic activity.
It's the acoustic of the room did not allow me to hear your question quite clearly.
Okay, so that's all right. Sorry. So concerning your event or your couple of events, what in the red zone that you in the presentation, in the red zone, do you have what's the percentage of the population that inhabits the red zones as compared to the rest of the country? And would you say that, or is there any policies or governmental policies that limits the amount of people that stays or inhabits? So you could say, well, you know what, or the nation says, this area you can't inhabit, or you have a certain amount of people to prevent any disasters from, or it be affecting them in such a way that they lose a lot of stuff. And if so, if no, is it the thought of, you know, especially for the volcanic eruptions, you say that it's a black swan event. So we will, you know, have you inhabit, but in our side, we will have a stricter or more quicker response, emergency response to these situations.
All right, thank you. In terms of the percentage of persons populating the red zone, I don't have that information at hand to share with you. I could always find it out and get it to you. In terms of policies for persons living in that area, based on past events and experience with La Soufrière, it being the type of volcano it is, the policies from NEMO, and they can speak better to it, is that in terms of personal constructing, because at the aftermath of the La Soufrière eruption, the government would have relocated a number of persons, moving them more closer to the orange zone, and giving them a more safer environment there to live. Also, persons who are living in areas where you have a path towards pyroclastic flows and lahars, those persons also relocated as well. So the government is in a massive drive in relocating a lot of persons currently. I can tell you this though, but the red zone area is sparsely populated. It is not as densely populated as other parts of the island. In terms of the number, I will not be specific that, but I know in terms of the persons living there, because of the mountainous terrain, you don't have a lot of persons living in that particular area. Hence the reason why we was able to evacuate persons. And then, because of the road network, it's easy to evacuate persons from the red zone to the green zone, allowing for that to happen quite easily. At the same time, informing persons in terms of building standards, and also educating persons about what the possibilities are in terms of if there is another eruption, what needs to be done. So persons are better equipped with information and knowledge as to be able to then reduce, as in this case, we didn't have any loss of lives. And thank God, as opposed to earlier on, where we had a lot of persons, over 1,600 persons who have died. So that is the situation there with the red zone area.
Any other questions? Yes, It's a gentleman in the green shirt. Please say your name.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Orion Curtin from the BWA, treatment plant operator. My question is to Mr. Durand. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, from Dominica. Throughout the problems y'all had, the devastation of the country, or the island, sorry. I'm just curious from a standpoint, what was the national priority in regards to getting back on your feet? Was it distribution, water distribution, or wastewater treatment? Sorry, water treatment.
Our priority was the water treatment because we are aware of giving you water is one, yes, but we don't want to create a bigger catastrophe by somebody getting sick, you know, through bad water.
So in regards to the distribution, seeing as you said you had problems with manpower.
Yes.
After the treatment, y'all were focusing on distribution or to get knowledge out to the public that the water could be contaminated?
Yes. After that, after the treatment, we started working on distribution. And flushing, so that we could know, the public could know that it was now safe to drink. But then we had communication by then.
Okay, right, because you have problems with communication getting out to the public?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Okay, I recognize Alvan Nouvellon. I'll take this as the last question because I think we are pressed for time, and we will resume after lunch.
Great, thank you. So connecting to the presentation I did, I would like to ask maybe to one or two of you, I mean, how much do you consider as a national water operator that you are very well and on a daily basis coordinating with other critical entities like the private sector, suppliers, the Ministry of Health, and so on and so forth? Are you doing so? And if not, would you consider that like a stronger coordination and regular coordination with several actors around the wash sector would help you and reduce all the different challenges that you are facing during emergencies? So yeah, the value of coordination, how coordination would help you reduce all the list of issues that you were mentioning, the four of you. Or not, I mean, yeah, maybe the response is yes, maybe the response is no. So I don't know, anyone who wants.
Yes. Yeah, in terms of coordinating with WASH, in helping to mitigate and to deal with some of the issues and the disasters that we face, of course, that will be from management standpoint as to what are the needs at the time within the particular country, and if we have persons on ground with the expertise to be able to deal with and to handle the challenges of the disaster that we encountered. Like, for example, St. Vincent, in our case, we were able to, through NEMO, and other partners involved, was able to then, bolster and be able to respond to the challenges and the overwhelming needs at that particular time. But of course, we would have definitely certainly reached out, and I believe other countries as well, when there are needs, to reach out for as much help as possible in terms of education prior to how to deal with challenges and disaster response, because preparedness is very important. Being prepared is very, very important. In fact, there's a quotation from Spencer W. Kimball, which says, preparedness, when properly pursued, is a way of life, not a sudden, spectacular program. So it's about the way of life, how we then best practice every day in, day out, having these policies being developed, and also, as was mentioned, they are very dynamic in being able to then respond, having something that will respond, a plan that could be able to then overall reach possibilities of disasters. And as I say, each time something happens, we learn from it, and we can then be able to develop more in terms of a response. But of course, the countries will certainly welcome whatever help as needed in terms of being resilient and prepared for any disaster ahead.
Right, thank you, Mr. Jackson. Indeed, I think you have done a good job in responding to this question, but I should just add that the CDIMA and the whole WASH grouping in the Caribbean, again, we have learned quite a bit of lessons from the experiences of Dominica, St. Vincent, and the other issues that have arisen in the region. For example, for accommodation, I know that when there was the event in St. Vincent, there was on standby one of these cruise ships that would have been available for accommodation if the need arose, and as to act as a shelter as well. But particularly when we have responders or people who want to come in and assist with the recovery and response effort, that there would have been some form of accommodation. So I think that's a mechanism that has been put in place. I think as well from the experience at Dominica, where Dominica then were able to receive donations of water bladders, that again became very useful so that they could have been able to ship water to some other jurisdictions who were without water or as a backup situation. So a lot of that is going on, and increasingly we've seen improvements in how we do assessments. And again, the most important of all is the planning, and we have to keep reviewing the plans, upgrading them, because a plan is not static. So I'd like you to please give our panel a round of applause. And want to thank you as well for your contributions and inputs. I see that you're warming up with the questions. I have no doubt in the other sessions coming up, we are even going to be a lot more active and participatory. So do you...
Mr. Ignatius, if you may just permit me quickly.
Yes, go
as is mentioned, as written in the book, the leaflet that we have here that guides us, we saw thanks must be also made from CWSA St. Vincent to Mr. Garth Saunders, who was at the helm at that time, who led the CWSA through the ash. At that time, very, very resilient individual, and he was inundated with a lot of challenges at that particular time, but he came through and he was able to then bring us through there. And now he's deceased. God bless his soul. We thank him for his contribution. He was also a member and contributed to CWOC, and we appreciate his legacy that was left.
Yes, we do. We will remember him. And if you read in the magazine, we have an obituary in his honor. Thank you very much. Do enjoy lunch. We're going to be back here at about 2:25. Thank you. Our guides over there will direct you to the lunch area.